Welcome to the Wayback Chronicles podcast. My name is Keith Abbott, and I'm here with my lifelong friends, Noel Kirsch and Steve McKelkey. In the Wayback Chronicles, we discuss everything that's happened from 1970s to the present.
And the great thing is we're talking about 1978 right now, and what a cool year so far. So we've talked about music, and, you know, Keith, do you still have your bell bottoms on?
I do, of course. I haven't even washed them yet.
Yeah, nice. Well, you know, I'm sure your wife has some concerns about that at this point, but definitely, music showed a lot of disco and a lot of small bands that turned into something big down the road, like Van Halen, and a lot of just awesome music from that year. And then, Keith, you took us through a really cool path in world events and politics, and I'm really excited that 1978 has brought so much cool stuff. I was only 5 years old. Keith, you were 6, and Noel was 4, and
4.
And so we definitely learned a lot so far through this whole process. So very cool.
Yeah, it's funny to think, world events with the stuff that we just have a glimmer of imagining of. But what was interesting was seeing the progression of what, when we got older, kind of what it led into. So I thought that was interesting. And then again, the music playlist. Good Lord. I mean,
I know,
like that could be on my playlist of today for as many good songs that was on there. Folks, if you haven't listened to that music episode, you've got to hit the like button and subscribe. You got to hit the subscribe and download these podcasts and take a listen to that, because it's just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think when we were doing the music episode, I told you guys I'd listened to the shadow dancing. Like I went and Googled it while Steve was talking and listened to it. And I thought I'd never heard that song before. Well, since it entered the playlist, and I've been playing the playlist like every time I get in my car, Shadow Dancing by Andy Gibb has become like, I've listened to that song probably 50 or 60 times. It's really good. Another one that I told you guys about was the one by Samantha Sang and Bee Gees called Emotion.
Oh, yeah.
That's also in the 78 playlist.
Yeah.
It's I hate to admit it that I like that one so much, but it's actually a pretty good song. So, but it is really, really good. Really good playlist. Keith, good job putting it together.
That was fun. Yeah. So everybody subscribe to the podcast and go over to our Facebook page, follow our Facebook page, and download that playlist, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Wayback Chronicles is how you find us on Facebook. So we're easy to find there.
Absolutely. And on your favorite podcast platform, just search for us.
Yeah. I helped my mom find our podcast on Spotify, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, I can find my son on Spotify. This is so cool." And
YouTube and a whole bunch of other places.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. I didn't want to blow her mind, so I just left it at Spotify. He was impressed with that. So,
does she have an Alexa device?
She has one of the oldest iPhones, I think, still like in operation. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're bored cooking in the kitchen one night, all you got to do is ask Alexa to play the Wayback Chronicles 2, and it'll start right up. So there you go.
There you go.
That's true.
So,
that's
anyway,
true. Perfect time to listen to us.
That's right.
Yeah. So today, we're going to talk about 1978 technology, and no one I know. Well, it's probably pretty close, but maybe give a little edge to Noel from the technology factor.
100%.
So we finally have our technology guy talking about technology. So this only makes sense. Technology guy from Texas Tech University, and so all right, Noel, looking forward to hearing what you're going to share about 1978 tech. So let's roll.
Well, I have done quite a bit of research. I think I've had couple weeks here since the last time we recorded, and so I've had a little bit of time to do some research, and I kind of dug in pretty deep on a few of these. There's 14 items on my little spreadsheet here that I put together, and I'm hoping that I can cover this and do it some justice, because 1978 technology, when we first were doling out the categories or different topics, I guess, for us to go and research, and I got technology, I'm like, wow, this is going to be pretty dull, because we think 1978, at least me, I was thinking 1978, don't really think technology, but I'm going to have to blow your minds, I think, on a few things. It certainly blew mine when I started researching and digging into this. But okay, so in 1978, a technology that you guys use I guarantee you probably use this today. If you had food delivered to your house, it was used. If you had Amazon that delivered something to your house, they use it. Um, it's on your cell phones. It's used by your cell phones, and I'm going to give you guys a guess as to what this technology is. But it started in 1978. Any
I'm
guesses?
I'm gonna guess GPS.
That's exactly right. Steve, Steve cheated a little bit, but yes, it is GPS.
Key.
So the very first,
I totally screwed that one up.
yeah, you did. That's okay.
That's why I just kept my mouth shut right then. I'm like, I'm out.
In 1978, GPS technology got its first. That's when it first came onto the scene. So you talk about some technology that has had a major impact on our world and on our society. It started in 78, so it's pretty cool. So in 78, they launched the first GPS satellite. It was an experimental satellite at that time. And it established the first GPS system. Going way back to 1957, the Russians launched Sputnik. Two American physicists were monitoring the radio signals being transmitted by the satellite, and they figured out that you could use something called the Doppler effect to determine the satellite's position in space. So another nerd asked these two nerds if they could figure out how to reverse the calculation and basically figure out their position on Earth by calculating their distance from a signal transmitted to the satellite. So when Sputnik was up there, they were like able to figure out like the satellite's position, and all they did was they just reversed the calculation and used the satellite's known position and transmit a signal, and it came back to them. And by that transmission, they were able to figure out where they were on Earth. So that was at that time in 1957 was kind of the theory, the very beginnings, the birth of GPS.
That's
and
wild.
So from 1957 to 1978, they did a lot of research, and a bunch of nerds got together and they were figuring out how to do this, and they were starting to understand how this technology could be used. And the U.S. military really started in 1972, conducted flight tests of GPS receivers over the White Sands Missile Range, basically using kind of pseudo satellites that were not actually in orbit, but they were actually just hovering in the air. And they were basically able to test having satellites in space and doing this kind of GPS technology basically in our atmosphere was kind of what they did back in 1972. Then from 72 to 78 is when they started building the satellites and developing this plan to put satellites into space. And so they did that. And then by 1985, they had 10 of these Block 1 GPS satellites launched into space, and the GPS concept really came into full effect. Basically, they had all the technology in place they needed to actually do GPS as we know it today. Ronald
That's
Reagan.
So cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. It was originally designed to be used strictly by the military, and in 1983, a Korean 747 commercial airliner veered off course and flew into restricted airspace above Russia and was shot down, killing 269 people on board the aircraft. And in response to this, President Reagan made the decision to make GPS available to civilians as well. So it was back used by the military going way back. And then the 83 747 commercial airliner that crashed or was shot down really caused Reagan to say GPS really should be available to civilians, although he directed the military to make a degraded signal available to civilians due to Cold War concerns. So he didn't want to make that GPS technology available to the Russians to give them advantage in the military Cold War that was going on at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I tell you, I really appreciate GPS. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about, well, how often do I use it? Well, probably more than I realize. I mean, I use it today driving around town. But my favorite part about GPS is whenever Amazon notifies me that they're 10 stops away. and like I can't wait to track it, see where they're on the map, see how much closer they're getting. And of
Yep.
course, whenever they get to my house to deliver, I never want to be over eager.
Yeah.
So wait for the driver to put it on the front porch, then get back in the car, and then I go grab my package. I mean, thank
You
God
know,
for GPS. So
you don't want to
it's
be you don't want the Amazon driver to think you've been sitting there stalking him as he drives down the
yeah,
street,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah. Not
yeah.
that
I
guy.
mean, it's only coffee filters. How can I be that excited? But hey,
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. But
Well, I'll tell you. So here's something funny. Here's a little side story to this, right? So
mhm.
we were going to our camping trip a couple of weeks ago, and here's how Steve is dependent on the text messaging Amazon system, right? So we were trying to make this wiffle ball golf game that we were going to play in the campsite that went over like a lead balloon, by the way. So
totally,
anyway, but
total
so
waste.
so we figured out that it wasn't going to make it to my house on time because I live in the sticks, right? So we had it Amazon delivered to Steve's house. Well, like it was delivered and it had been there, and Steve's like texting me like, "Hey man, when are the wiffle balls supposed to get here?" And I pull up Amazon and there's like, I take a screenshot of the picture that shows that it's at his doorstep. And, and I send it to him like, "It's there, dude." So, so that's how dependent he's gotten on his tracking. Like
Oh
when I
yeah,
send it to
yeah,
him, he has no idea, you know.
yeah. I'm useless. My brain's dead now thanks to
Yeah.
GPS.
Yeah.
So,
Right?
GPS has replaced a small part of everybody's brain at this point.
Agreed.
So,
totally,
but
totally.
just imagine, like, if you think back to like the early days of like Domino's Pizza when they delivered pizzas to you for, and then under 30 minutes or less. Like they did that without any GPS
Yeah.
directions back in the day. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
I
Um,
just am I'm dumbfounded at taxi drivers in big
oh
cities.
yeah, no
How in
kidding.
the world did they do
Yeah,
that? You
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Well, so back in '89, well, so okay, so I'm gonna kind of fast forward a little bit. So um, the U.S. government launched more like next generation GPS satellites between 1989 and 1990, and then the Gulf War in 1990 is the first war that used GPS. And so, but the GPS like equipment, and I've got pictures of this to show you guys, but the GPS equipment was pretty big. Like it was not like the portable. It was basically like the size of a laptop or a little bit bigger. And so like they had these GPS units that were inside the Humvees, and then like a like a like an ice maker size, like a freestanding ice maker size was the size of the GPS units that were used in like the ships and stuff like that. So that started off a project to create a handheld GPS unit, which was completed by 1995. GPS was declared, basically, well, they developed a smaller handheld unit size that was small enough to like fit inside your palm, basically.
Wow.
And so in 2000, President Clinton issued an order to make the same signal that was available to military available to all citizens, and that's really when it became like a thing for citizens, was in by that order in 2000. And in 2004, Qualcomm successfully tested GPS technology portable enough to fit into a cell phone. So in 1995 was like when the Tom Toms came out and things like that.
Yeah.
That GPS signal was not that great, but it was still a GPS signal, small enough to fit into your car. I had one.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
yeah, it was still very primitive back in '95, and then in 2000 it took a leap forward when Clinton made the same signal that the military was making available to everybody, and then it became basically small enough to fit inside a cell phone in 2004, and the rest, as they say, is history. So, but it all started in 1978. So
Wow.
GPS,
Yeah, big deal.
big deal. Yeah, for sure. So
It's almost worth talking about on 2 podcast episodes, don't you think?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm having a little deja vu, maybe. I don't know.
You guys
I
are so
remember when I said that and I said it and I was like, "Oh crap, that's technology."
Hey, but from the fact that two presidents helped forward that
Yep.
Yeah.
into modern day use, totally made it a world politics and world events.
Yep.
There you go. There
That's
you go.
true.
Silky
true.
segue between the two.
1978, the next like event. It's not really like a big event, but this kind of could also fit too in the U.S. events and politics, I guess. But it was the first time in 1978 was the first time a computer was installed in the White House. So U.S. government had funded many computing projects going back to the 40s, but it wasn't until the Carter administration that a computer was actually installed in the White House. So
Interesting.
the Hewlett Packard HP 3000 computer, which I looked this up on a Google search, thing is like a large freezer and refrigerator side by side. It's like that. Think about that big. It's huge, like a commercial freezer and refrigerator, like those
Oh, I
big.
see it here.
Yeah,
Wow.
massive, massive. So every staffer was given a terminal. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it, it's huge. So every staffer was given a terminal to access it because they couldn't have these big refrigerator units at each desk. So they all just connected to it, and all the computing was done on the big refrigerator thing. But that's what it was. And then they acquired a Xerox Alto printer, and the printer is equally ridiculous, but that's really pretty much what they use it for, was printing stuff off, printing memos, and things like that. It was pretty early days, but I thought that was
dot matrix available or what?
Yeah, pretty much. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet that computer threw off some heat.
I bet it did, man.
You know it.
I bet it did. Had all the spinning stuff and the tubes and stuff like that, vacuum tubes inside it and everything. So it was nothing like what we've got today for sure. But okay, so I'm gonna ask you guys a trivia question. So this is the next one, but its original name was called Reflective Optical Video Disc System. What do you think that was?
Laser disc.
Yes. Later, it was known as Disco Vision, was what they originally called it, was Disco Vision back in 1978. But it was later known as Laser Vision, and then after that was known as Laser Disc. But Disco Vision was what it was, the name it was first released under in December 1978, and it was only released in one market, Atlanta, Georgia. Which don't ask me why. Yeah. It was released only in Atlanta, Georgia, but the player itself cost $700, which in 1978 dollars, in today's dollars, that's $2,300.
That's pricey
for a laser disc player.
That's pricey.
This was not widely used by a lot of people, but y'all want to guess what the first movie to be released on Disco Vision was?
It just came out in 78?
78.
Wow.
Think about a movie
Star Wars?
Think about a movie. No, that's a good guess. But think about a movie that was kind of groundbreaking. I'll give you a hint. Steven Spielberg movie.
Okay. Close Encounters.
Nope. It's a good guess too.
E.T.?
Nope. That was in the 80s. It was Jaws.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So it had the best sound and best visual of any player on the market at that time. So they initially is a success with the player selling out across Atlanta. So apparently Atlanta was scooping these things up left and right. And then it did move on to other markets after kind of the success. It was tested in Atlanta, and then it moved on to other markets. But it was entered laser. Then it went through a name change. Laserdisc was introduced by MCA and Philips, and then it basically it was offered as like the better audio and video quality than anything else on the market, but it was so expensive that it never really took hold. And it did gain significant popularity in parts of Asia, but it was kind of the forerunner to the CD and DVD. So they kind of took that same technology, took the technology that was good for the audio part and the video part, and then use that same technology to release what we know today as the CD and DVD. But again, that was the first time that was ever released, was in 1978. So I thought
those things were record player size.
Yeah. Massive.
They were huge.
And they're two-sided too. So like in the movie would stop and say flip over, and you had to flip it over just like a record.
Yeah.
So
I remember a kid in my neighborhood had one of those, and remember the father always talking about how expensive those discs were.
Oh yeah.
And so like I don't remember seeing anybody that had the laser disc system that had a lot of the actual disc, just because of the price. So probably why they quickly disappeared.
Yep. Yep.
That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know that I would have let my kids be flipping around a disc that costs that much. You know, like you just scratch it and be like, "Do not touch that. I'll break your face off." But
Yeah.
anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. So this is the next one. So Texas Instruments Inc. introduced the Speak and Spell in 1978. It was
Love that thing.
Oh man, totally. I don't know how many hours I wasted playing with that thing. And we have friends that can do the Speak and Spell voice, and I don't know if I want to try it, but we have a good friend of ours, and we won't say his name on the podcast, but y'all know who I'm talking about, that can do the Speak and Spell voice. It's so funny. But
the initials SB.
That's the one.
Yep.
That's the one. I used to crack up like, "Hey, say this, say this." He'd say it. Oh my gosh, he had that voice down perfect.
Oh yeah, totally.
I thought it was kind of interesting that it was really started by Speak and Spell technology. They weren't trying to create a toy at that time. They were using technology that was used to, like, basically it was used to be an electronic duplication of the human vocal tract on, basically to kind of help people that had like medical conditions where they didn't have their own voice. So it was kind of used as a substitute for that. And then
Interesting.
it was using what's called LPC, or linear predictive coding, which is the precursor to the voice over IP technology that we use heavily today. So this all started back in 1972. A bunch of engineers were really working on technology again, like the linear predictive coding that became really kind of the technology behind voice over IP, or VoIP technology that we use today for almost all of our phone systems these days. So thought that was kind of interesting, but it was kind of technology they were using, and then Texas Instruments was like, "Hey, you know what, we could do this to like make this toy that could help teach kids how to speak and spell." So that's what they
cool.
did. But yeah,
I didn't know that story.
Yep, thought that was kind of cool. But development began in 1976 with an initial budget of $25,000, which is a pretty big budget if you think about it. I don't know what that is in today's dollars, but that's not a small budget. But anyway,
did y'all also have the speaking math when you were kids?
I didn't have that one.
I didn't have that one.
Yeah,
it may explain a lot as to why I suck at math, but didn't have that one. Did you have that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Nice. We kind of have a couple. The next ones are kind of a couple medical. There was a lot of medical technology breakthroughs in 1978. So the first one, which is by far the biggest one of the two, was the very first test tube baby was born named Louise Joy Brown. So this is in vitro fertilization, or IVF, which we know today it's a procedure that was pioneered in Britain. And Louise was born on July 25th, 1978. And so her parents, Leslie and John Brown, had been trying to conceive naturally for 9 years, but Leslie was faced complications of blocked fallopian tubes. And so they really tried to, couldn't have a baby. And so this technology, or this procedure, was developed in Britain, and they were the first ones to try it. And it resulted in the baby being born. So it was kind of like this breakthrough moment in medical technology in 1978. And so an article I found in my research from 2018 reported that over 8 million babies have been born from IVF since 1978. So
wow,
that's pretty amazing.
That's pretty insane.
Wow.
The whole procedure was termed the test tube babies, but really in reality, they're not born in a test tube at all. Their conception actually takes place in a petri dish, and then it's injected into the mother. But anyway, thought that was kind of pretty amazing.
That's wild. Oh, heck yeah, it is.
Yeah. I know people, can name names of people that have had that procedure, and their babies are among one of those 8 million babies. So I thought that was kind of a really cool thing from 1978. I didn't realize that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Science technology at its best right there.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. So the next medical breakthrough was they developed the genetically engineered insulin. So the first genetically engineered synthetic human insulin was produced using, of all things, E. coli in 1978 by two doctors. I'm not going to try to say their name, but at the Beckman Research Institute of the City of Hope in collaboration with Herbert Boyer at Genentech. So a bunch of names that I'm not going to read out here, but it was the first available biosynthetic human insulin that was ever developed. And so that kind of that prior to that, it was kind of developed using a more difficult process and kind of using things that were a little bit more hard to come by. This was actually used using safflower, the safflower plant. So they were using that to kind of develop the insulin and stuff. But anyway, kind of cool.
It's that right there is an amazing story that you can take down a rabbit hole. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I just the whole race against time, a small company that created this with a group of scientists, and there were other companies that were huge that were trying to compete with that. And I think that there are some instances in our show that I go back and I think that deserves its own time, and I think that's one of them.
Yep.
So
that was pretty cool.
impressive.
Pretty cool. This next one, I kind of really nerded out on this one, so I had plenty of time. You guys are texting each other, I can tell. So
no, we're not. I'm playing with.
we had deja vu again on the insulin story.
Really?
Yeah.
I've got a bad memory, man. I don't even remember that.
I mean, it's like you've had nothing going on.
All right.
Yeah, totally. Y'all both delivered it beautifully. It's a nice job to you both.
All right, Space Invaders was invented in 1978. It was the first shoot 'em up arcade game developed by Tomohiro Nishikado. And you have to say it like that, otherwise you just can't say it. But
exactly.
Nishikado drew inspiration for the game from early shooting games like Breakout from 1976 and Gunfight from 1975. He also thought this was interesting. He drew inspiration from War of the Worlds and Star Wars and an anime film I've never heard of called Space Battleship Yamato. And so the Space Invaders game set many firsts in the video game industry that shaped the way video games are developed even up to today. So it was prior to that, there was a timer on most games. Like Breakout was like a timer. You only had so much time to play the game. But Space Invaders was the first game to interact with the player, with the enemies in the game responding to aim of the cannon and shooting back at the player. It was the first game that ever had that kind of, hey, I can be shot by this game and it can knock me out. It was also the first to popularize a player achieving a high score and the first to allow a player's score to be saved. Just think about those two things. Those seemed like that's just the way every game is these days. But this was the first one. This was groundbreaking stuff back in 1978. So it became the first game you could get your name up on a high score, thing and whatever. And it was, anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. It was also the first to eliminate the timer used by the games prior to Space Invaders, and the first to allow players to advance to the next level and continue their gameplay. So you can finish. It was the first game to introduce this level, and then you finish this level, you can advance to the next level, and on and on and on. And it was the first game where players were given multiple lives. So if you died, you could come back and you could play until all your lives are expended, and on and on and on. So all these things today sound like second nature, it's just part of every game you play. But back then, this was brand new stuff.
Big deal.
So, yeah, it was really groundbreaking game in a lot of respects. But
I tell you, I can still hear in my head the sound of that game, the music, the explosions, the firing, everything. It was such a distinct sound. When you walked into somewhere, you could instantly pick up that sound.
Yeah, the soundtrack was 4 simple diatonic descending bass notes repeating in a loop, which was dynamic and changed pace during stages, like the heartbeat that increased as the difficulty of the game increased. So it was, again, that was one of the first of this game too, to actually have a soundtrack that was tied to the gameplay.
To the game.
Crazy. just so cool. But the game developers for such legendary games as Donkey Kong, Mario, Legend of Zelda, Metal Gear, Pokemon, and Doom all cited Space Invaders as their inspiration for getting into designing their respective video games. So this is kind of the birth, really, of all those games. Really was inspired by Space Invaders. But
It's wild.
other shoot up games such as Defender, Asteroids, Galaxian, and my personal date night favorite, Galaga. Galaga was like, Clint and I played on our dates. We would go to like the mall and go to the arcade, and we'd play Galaga. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just, I don't wonder how many couples these days that are married did the same thing as us. You know, it was kind of a date night thing, simple game and just so fun. But anyway,
That's awesome.
so
It's so cool, all the retro arcade games places that are popping back now. And I know we talked about that in past episodes, but I'm starting to see them even more and more now, which is super cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
sure.
awesome.
To say that Space Invaders was a success is an understatement. So to date, it has made a whopping 13 billion with a B since its release in 1978. 13 billion. So
that's crazy.
I know. I did some geeking out on 13 billion. So 13 billion in quarters. So it's a quarter. You pay 1 quarter to play Space Invaders. So I figured out $13 billion is 52 billion quarters.
Wow.
52 billion.
That's a lot of coins.
So it gets worse. So each modern day quarter weighs 5.75 grams. So converted to pounds, 52 billion quarters weighs approximately 660 million pounds, which is a lot of quarters.
Golly, that's a lot of quarters.
Each quarter is 0.955 inches wide. So if you laid 52 billion quarters side by side, it would stretch 4.1 billion feet, which is 783,775 miles. The Earth's circumference is 24,901 miles. So if you laid 52 billion quarters side by side, it would go around the world 31 times.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
That's a lot of quarters.
That's a lot of quarters. I love that illustration, man.
I kept digging on that. And I was asking Lynn, I'm like, how many inches this square feet, the miles and feet? And she was like, she knows all that stuff just off the top of her head. But anyway, thought it was kind of cool. That's a lot of quarters.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So Space Invaders. That was cool.
That is awesome.
You mentioned Breakout.
Yeah,
I saw that. I hate to think I might steal something from you, but they sold over a million cartridges in 1978 in that game alone.
Dang, I did not catch that.
Yeah, ended up being the Atari 2600's 11th best-selling game ever.
Yeah, I had console.
Yeah.
Wasn't it one of the? Did it ship with every? Didn't the Atari's 2600 come with Breakout? I think it did.
I can't remember.
Maybe later. Mine didn't.
Yeah,
I never had Breakout, but it probably did later. It was probably one of those bundles, you know.
Yeah, or I thought there was a game that shipped with Atari. It's 2600 at some point.
So was Breakout the one where you used the paddle, the dial paddle, right, instead of the joystick?
Yeah. You had to move the little thing down the bottom and keep the ball up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the good old days of video games.
Totally.
Yes.
So the first so this is the next one. So basically this is another computer history thing. So the first public BBS, or the first like bulletin board system ever made, was released in 1978. So I kind of wondered if I should include this one, but really it's kind of the early predecessor to the online forums that we have these days. Mm-hmm. So, it was kind of the very first, Reddit and all the different systems that we use today. So that kind of started back in 1978. It was called ARPANET, was the first
ARPANET.
Yeah, the first BBS system. So ARPANET was kind of the early predecessor to email, but it was also the early precursor to our modern day online discussion forums. So it was
Interesting.
yeah,
Never heard of that one.
it's kind of interesting because the two guys that developed it were basically like they were part of a group in Chicago called the Chicago Area Computer Hobbyist Exchange, or CASH, and they were 1978. There was a really bad, it's called the Great Blizzard of 1978, hit Chicago. So these two guys were like holed up in their homes with nothing to do. And so they started working on a computerized bulletin board system. They called it CBBS. And the system came into existence through basically these two guys kind of created a computer that had used a local phone line to establish a connection to other computers, and they allowed other people to connect into those computers, through the phone line, post a message, and then disconnect. So you could only have one person connected to the line at any one time. So they would call in, a person would call into the BBS, post their message, disconnect, and then the other person would connect. They would see the message and respond to it. So as a one person in, and you could wait for hours and hours and hours and get busy signals until somebody disconnected from it and you happen to grab the connection to the
Oh,
computer
wow.
to post your message.
That's
So it
crazy.
was, yeah, they said they kept the count of callers and they had 253,301 callers called into that system before they finally retired it. But yeah, it was,
Wow.
you talk about early goings, but just two guys bored out of their minds, like, hey, let's create some way for us to communicate with each other. And
That's
so
cool.
that's what they did. They came up with the online BBS, but pretty cool.
That is wild.
Yep. Yeah. The next item is the email actually started in 1978. So obviously technology that we still use today, big technology that we still use today. Um, there's a lot of controversy about who the inventor of email is. Actually, there's kind of two different answers depending on who you ask. But there was a programmer called Ray Tomlinson that claims that he created the text-based messaging between company computers through a network called ARPANET in 1971. Was kind of the first email, using air quotes here. And then meanwhile, a guy named V.A. Shiva, Indian last name, can't pronounce that. He built an electronic messaging platform in 1978 when he was 14 years old, basing it off the internal communication system at the University of Medicine and Dentistry in Newark, New Jersey, when he was
At
a research
14 years
fellow.
old?
At 14 years old. So
God, what a
in
nerd.
1982, the Ayadurai, the Shiva Ayadurai, the Indian name, was awarded the copyright for email, but still disputes today over who the true inventor of email was. But that was kind of in 1978 was when he really kind of developed this platform. And then he ultimately was given the patent for email, but it started in 1978. So
Wild.
yep.
That's wild.
For sure. So
Jeez.
then my last two, I'm going to kind of bundle these together just in the interest of time, but I'm using a spreadsheet. So this was the very first spreadsheet that was ever released. It was called VisiCalc. It hit the market in 1978. It to that day was, spreadsheets use a whole lot of computing power. And so this was kind of like the first one that was used for like personal or business computers. And didn't require massive volumes of computing power. So it's kind of what made VisiCalc like big in the marketplace. Of course, it's been replaced. And then the other thing was WordStar, was the word processing application. WordStar was used by a lot of people. It's kind of like the first like Microsoft Word back in the day, and then it got replaced really because it didn't adapt. Like they didn't release a good volume or a good platform for like Windows, and so they kind of got left behind in the dust whenever Windows kind of came on the scene. But yeah, thought it was kind of interesting, the first spreadsheet and then the word processor. prior to their word processor, it was just a lot of electronic typewriters, and things like that. That was really kind of the early goings of the word processor. But these two things kind of released. But
I actually remember WordStar because if I remember right, it was one of my parents' first computers was a Texas Instruments computer that actually had little cartridges
yep,
that went in for like a Atari 2600. But I remember my mom typing the Christmas letter in WordStar and printing up on the dot matrix
Really?
printer.
no
And
way.
of course,
Wow.
we thought we were cool because we had to type Christmas letter. So
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was kind of a cool transition that was taking place between the early 70s, where it was all typing, and then WordStar came on the scene, and it was heavy. If you like to use like commands and things like that, like the command prompt, if you ever use DOS and stuff, it was heavy command prompt. And so if that's what you like to do, then you could use WordStar. Of course, when Word came on the scene, all those all those entering commands and stuff went away, and it just have like menus and stuff. So they're executing the same prompts and things like that in the background, but it's done by a GUI, so a graphical user interface now. So it's just different. But
so it's sort of funny as you think back to technology, 45 years ago. So, we're like, man, that's not that amazing. But in the moment in 1978, where the world was technologically, that was some big stuff right there.
That's some
sure.
breakthroughs.
Especially the GPS and insulin stuff, which we brought up twice. So
Yeah.
It was so amazing. It should have been talked about twice.
Yeah, we might talk about the next episode. Just really emphasize it. We should.
Yeah, we should. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Every episode from now on, no matter what year it is, we talk about insulin and GPS.
I love it. I love it. Wow. But I mean, even spreadsheets and word processing. I mean, we think insulin's a big deal, but I mean, what office in this world isn't using one of those right now?
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's what I was trying to do is trying to find technology that we have today that was rooted in 1978. So if you look at technology, I mean, it's a pyramid. So older technology is kind of at the lower part of the pyramid, and then it moves on up to the top of the pyramid, which is what we have today. But it's all built on older technology. It's kind of at the lower part of that pyramid. So 78 is kind of at the lower, maybe middle part of that technology. When it comes to computers or when it comes to video games, it's at the very bottom tier of that technology chain. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Noel.
Good stuff, Noel. That was awesome.
Enough quarters to go around the world 31 times.
31 times.
That's a lot of quarters.
I appreciate you taking the time to do that math, because
I had to.
That really puts it in perspective in its own little way. So
that's cool. That's a lot of quarters.
That's a good visual.
660 million pounds of quarters. That's just a lot. So, yeah,
that's amazing.
Yep.
And to think something that simple, I mean, to our knowledge, would make that many billions of dollars. It's like, what can we come up today that in 40 years will be worth billions? That's so simple in our minds, but revolutionary. It's amazing to think something like that would happen. Crazy.
Sure.
Totally.
Good stuff, Noel. Thank you for running through that 78 technology with us. That's awesome.
You bet.
So what do we got on the next docket, Steve?
So next docket is going to be a little bit of mashup. So we're going to talk, the three of us are going to tag team TV and movies. So we'll see how well we're prepared for that, and then do a little bit just mashup on just a variety of pop culture, cool things, random things that happened in 1978. So we'll have that on the next two episodes. So sounds good to me.
Cool.
Very nice. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So I guess what we'll do is we'll close out technology, and we will see you all in the mashup of TV and movies episode coming up next time.
Excellent.
We'll talk to y'all later on, everybody.
See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wayback Chronicles. All shows are written and produced by Noel. Keith, and Steve. Massive thanks to those who made these memories possible for us through the years. All songs, sounds, and effects have been attributed in the comments section and through links listed on Wayback Chronicles.podbean.com. We look forward to taking you way back again in the very near future.